Welcome to today's episode of Lead From Within. I'm absolutely delighted today to be joined by Daniela Seabrook, one of the world's leading CHROs. We recorded the episode live in the Adecco offices in Zurich, and it was fantastic to spend the time together. Daniela is an HR leader who is deeply passionate about purpose, about inclusion, about well-being and health. And she makes sure that every role that she takes on has those topics at the heart because she ultimately believes it's the human that helps organizations to scale. Daniela is somebody who has many hats. She's a world-leading CHRO. She's also a clinical psychologist and an organizational psychologist. So really combining the scientific and healthcare backgrounds with an HR professional background. We had a conversation that spanned so many interesting topics, from the amount of transformation that's going on in the workplace and how that's impacting on people, through to the role of AI and how that's going to transform the world of work, through to talk in a more detailed way about some of the policies and strategies that the Adecco Group are taking towards making sure they're taking a proactive, preventative approach to well-being. So without further ado, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Welcome to Lead From Within, the podcast for people leaders that explores the fascinating intersection of mental health, leadership, and performance. Daniela, it's so lovely to see you, and thank you so much for making the time in, I know, what is an incredibly busy life you lead. Welcome to the Lead From Within podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a big pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So we've known each other for a couple of years now, and I've always admired your kind of incredible story and journey that you've had in balancing the professional world of HR and also having qualified as not only an organizational psychologist but a clinical psychologist. Would love to learn a bit more about your journey and your story. So tell me about you as a person and your career to date.
Oh dear, where to start? So as you already mentioned, I have an education in clinical psychology, but this is not actually where I originally, as a child, saw myself going. So very originally, I wanted to become a vet. I love animals up until today. And so I was determined to get there. So my whole education was really lined up to become a vet. Then once I actually got to go to university, I did realize maybe it's not the ultimate choice for me. But I still like the medical aspect, and so I thought human medicine, but then I actually really liked the psychological aspect, so then I chose ultimately clinical psychology, and I loved it. And I still, up to today, I'm very interested in particular, forensic psychology was always something which interested me, but also broader, the mental health space is something I'm a big advocate for, and so I continue to be really interested, passionate about it, and also how we can improve things around mental health in the workplace.
So did you take school then to become a vet, you had to have quite a science mind and be quite scientific and mathematical, is that right?
Well, mathematical, probably more biology, yes, yeah. I would agree. This is something I was always interested in. And later on in psychology, you have a lot of statistics, it's an empirical study, so I enjoyed that. I always enjoyed that. Also not the hardcore science, but certainly the scientific aspect, the theories behind it, how some of the insights we know today about human beings, psychology, mindfulness, all these things, mental health, where they come from, and understanding that was always something I was interested in, yeah.
So my journey was different. I was in the arts. So my first degree was in music, and I got to university, I thought I've dodged having to learn maths and statistics and neuroscience and biology. And then when I wanted to become a psychologist, I had to then learn that world. Yeah. So it was quite a steep learning curve for me.
Yeah, that's true. I also thought actually once I finished gymnasium, I'm done with maths, and then it comes back in statistics, but it's different statistics. Yeah. And I find that fascinating still today.
And why forensic psychology? What is it about that interests you?
Well, really, I would probably say even when I was studying, what was interesting me was the youth criminality or youth crime. I grew up in an environment, I would say, in a lower social middle class.
Yeah.
And also with lower class kids around me. And so I experienced, what it means when you don't necessarily always have parents who look after you and who are there for you, and what it means for the young, for the youth and for the young people, and how they can derail. And I was, in a way, I had this, of course it's an ideology, but I thought with the work I can maybe impact and influence it, and because they still have the whole life ahead of them, so that this was an area I was really interested to work with young people, in particular in the space of crime, or also in youth prison.
Yeah.
That was actually a motivator for me. And it was because how I grew up, where I grew up.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because all of the research and the commonality across all types of psychology is that early intervention is really important to good outcomes. And in children, that's never is there a truer place where that's real. And the earlier we can support people to have facilitative environments to thrive, better the life chances of that person can be.
Absolutely true. It's a bit like what you bring with genes, right? And then you can actually, when you have a right nurturing environment, the right context, it doesn't have to come as much through. And it's the same here. A context by itself can have a big impact.
Yeah.
So no matter actually what you bring with you, the context has a huge shaping impact.
Which isn't always talked about, is it? Like we talk,
right.
like society talks a lot about genes, and that's quite well understood. So the genotype concept has an understanding, but the phenotype concept, which is like how those genes then are unlocked in the environment, is less well recognized, and that's a real problem in our space, isn't it? Because what that means is that people put a huge amount of the emphasis on the individual in relation to, well, you are the individual responsible for your health and well-being, etc. But the truth is the environment is the thing that will unlock that person's health and well-being.
It's known, and you know that well, by research, it has a much bigger impact than genome. That's clear. And also in the space of, in clinical psychology, you do have some illnesses or some challenges which are stronger or which are clearly, from a research perspective, more stronger defined by genome, but a lot of it is actually also by the context in which you live and how you live and how you support it. I agree.
Which is a key piece in the puzzle of the topic of mental health and well-being in the workplace. It's that environmental thing, and I really want to come on to that topic with you because it's so critical. But before we get to that, take a few steps back. So you've taken that decision, I'm not going to be a vet, and you've never lost your love of animals because you now have a dog, is that right?
That's right, yes. Yeah.
And remind me, what dog do you have?
We have an Australian cobber dog. It's a bit like a Labradoodle.
Okay.
And he's called Charlie. He's a real big family member. No, he's not big, but he's a family member. He has a big space in the family, I can tell you that. But also there, beside that, animals give you this attachment, this connection, There's no one who is so happy when you come home like a dog,
Yes.
And even if you've been away for 2 hours, it's like if you have been away for weeks.
Yeah.
And then, so that's one thing, it's this really gives you a lot of positive emotion. And then also, it really forces you to go out, the dog. And that, from a mental health perspective, fitness perspective, has really a huge positive impact as well. Beside this connection, it's also being in nature, having to walk, and really enjoying. I really enjoy that. I take a lot out of that. It's a way for me to be resilient, to get inspiration, see the nature. I really, really enjoy that.
No, I totally agree. And actually, you're very generously hosting us in your beautiful offices in Zurich, which is a place surrounded by nature and such a beautiful setting here. So tell me about the Adecco Group, and tell me about why Zurich and the history of the organization.
So the Adecco Group is an organization which actually is about talent and technology. So we are one of the world leaders in professional services when it comes to talent and tech, or talent and technology. We have 3 business units. The biggest one is Adecco. So we're called the Adecco Group. And the corner, or the big part of our organization, is in the staffing or the talent space, and a lot of that is in staffing in Adecco. So that's one of our business units. Then we have one which is called Akkodis. That's where the tech comes into play. We acquired an organization a few years ago called ACA, and in there we then brought together our business in the staffing, in the IT technology space, and the ACA technology company, which is in the tech consultancy space, and then created Acodis with it. So there we have more than 20,000 tech consultants. We are advising organizations or we're consulting with organizations on breakthrough innovation projects. And then we have one business unit called Lee Hecht Harrison, or LHH. Now it used to be Lee Hecht Harrison as a full name. Many people will know it from the career transition or outplacement. That's where it actually started. We have now broadened it. So LHH by now also has a staffing business, professional staffing. Then we also have a big coaching business in there. Ezra is part of that as well, which is an incubated business of ours. Assessment is in their leadership development. So that's, I would say, the kind of strategic HR advisory business overall. The tech business, Acodis, where we advise on breakthrough innovation. And then there is this beautiful staffing business where we connect companies with people who work, so we bring people to work. We connect companies with the right skills for the future and help them to, ramp up and down, be flexible around what's needed, etc. So that is what Adecco does. Staffing, also outsourcing. We have a big outsourcing business. So we take over the whole process and everything. So these are our three business units. And together we are, the Adecco Group, we're about 70,000 people worldwide.
So it's a huge scale.
It's a big, yeah.
And so many businesses say, oh, people are at our heart. And I think so many businesses say that correctly. But for you as an organization, it really is true.
It's absolutely true. So our, I wouldn't say product, but what we offer is the connection between a person and work.
Yeah.
Be it in a business or also be it in consultancy, be it that we also help develop people, grow, keep their employability up. So it's really everything is around the person. And that's also our culture is very much centered around people.
And is that what drew you to take the role? Because you were in a role when we first met with Philips, and when you found this role, was it the people component that really excited you about it?
Yeah, so I actually spent my whole career in life sciences. So I worked in pharma and medtech, agriculture, and I always chose each of the company for the purpose. So being able to contribute with my work to a greater good, to something which is bigger than just having great products, is fundamental for me. And that also, to your question, brought me to the Adecco Group, because the purpose which we follow is really, we have a big social impact. We don't just impact one person when we connect them with work. We impact their family. We provide an individual with a deep psychological need is actually to be able to work, to contribute, to grow. And that is something which has a much larger scale than the individual itself, but it goes much beyond and has a lifelong impact for people. So that is what drove me to join the Adecco Group. And moreover, it's an HR business. And where else would I like to be the CHRO than in a business which is actually at the core is HR? And
do you think that changes how HR is perceived by the organization? Do you think as a result of it being an HR business, HR has a greater degree of respect or influence? Or
I actually think that the role of HR has generally increased in terms of relevance over the last years. Maybe one of the functions who had the biggest transformation or shift, and certainly also COVID helped a lot, or drove that shift from a focus on the employees, focus on the culture, focus on the well-being. That was a big thing with COVID. And now with the AI disruption coming through, I think there is this next evolution where HR, and in this case also IT and digital, that department really have to collaborate in how do we bring employees on the journey, how do we actually engage with our employees, and with the AI disruption also, how do we actually bring human connections to life stronger, the humanity in us as people. I think there HR's role will continue to be amplified. I wouldn't say necessarily it is the case because it's in an HR-driven organization. In fact, actually, what we noticed is we often don't try our own products enough in our own company. So it's something we are changing, that we are almost like the first customer, or customer zero, if you like, that we also leverage our own products, our own services, try them out, learn from them. So that's something we are doing more.
There's something just we've so normalized the world we're in, which is understandable because we're human beings and that's how we respond to the world we're in. But just hearing you talk just then, just thinking, it's still staggering when you stop and think about the fact we've been through COVID and how these huge global organizations, or any organization, responded, how every individual responded to that once in a generation experience. And then we've gone straight from that, and we've skipped a few crises in between, but then to the world of AI and the arrival of AI. And if you think about how that impacts on the world of work, and when we listen to any leading expert on the topic of AI, the impression is very much that this is a bigger revolution than the Industrial Revolution or the arrival of electricity, the invention of the wheel. If you look at what the likes of Mustafa Salman say about it, this is a once in a generational change. And how do you as an HR leader think about that? Like, so how have you personally navigated COVID and now AI?
I mean, COVID, right? We were all unprepared.
Yeah.
And I think when I think back the first month, it was all a bit, because we didn't know how long it's going to take. But in the good way, I think the good thing is with humans is we also don't always think of the biggest catastrophe. So somehow there is this preservation of ourselves. So I actually thought, okay, let's see what's coming. I'm also quite an optimistic person. So we just went into it. And I think what really stood out for me is that in companies, we really focused a lot on the well-being of the people, which I think was unprecedented, opposite to before. We also thought about it, but then it was really critical and important that we reached out, supported. It took us maybe a few weeks, right, to realize what do we need to do, how can we best support. But that is something which stood out for me, how we as a company, I can talk when I was at Philips and I saw around me what's happening. We had every week CHRO calls with companies around the world. What are you doing? That was the other thing, how we, in crisis, how everyone comes together and supports each other, no matter if you're in the same industry or not. That was quite strong. And personally, I think the consequence of isolation, also when I think of our son who couldn't go to school for a while, we were new in the country, we just relocated about 4 or 5 months before. The negative implication it has on young people in that time, on the isolation and you can't exchange socially, this is also something which I certainly learned then.
Yeah, and we still don't really know the impact of that. I look at my children who are 11, 8 and 7, and I think like it's so interesting to try and benchmark their development against norms and then think about, well, what's the impact of that social isolation for that era?
And I also think what you probably saw in that moment more, the differences between how people deal with it. You know, some people can bounce back faster. Some people somehow find things to do or to connect, still find ways to connect. And others really, retracted and isolated more. And so for mental health, it has had a huge impact, in particular for young people.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because they're obviously two quite different things, COVID and AI. But they are both hugely transformative of societal norms. And both, to your point, can have a massive impact on people's mental health and well-being. And as organizations now go into, find me a big business that isn't talking about transformation right now, right? And a large part of that is AI. And that it's really exciting, to your point about optimism. Wow, think about how great it can be. And it's massively disrupting for people's mental health. So how should HR teams be thinking about supporting their people during that?
I think that in COVID, we probably quickly or faster could come around and say, okay, it's a virus, we need vaccination, we need tests. So we somehow could compartmentalize it in things we know. and okay, let's see how we can get about it. What is the treatment? I think that's a bit different with AI. So we know a few things, but there is a lot we don't know. And then there are all these assumptions how it's going to be and when it will take over, the intelligence of a human and so on. Different years are out there, but it will probably happen one day. But I think because there is a big unknown, it's much harder, I think, for us to deal with it. And I see around me some people who are embracing it very much because they just love technology, they love progress and so on. And I see many people who are scared of it because we don't know really what the impact is going to be on the work, on the workforces, is that people are afraid. And with that, also don't want to talk about it too much. And I think from an HR perspective, it's important that we help people to step into it because it's not going to go away. It's not something which will stop being around us. So the more we can be open to it, we can embrace it, we can engage with it, the more it will also allow everyone to participate in it and integrate with it rather than see it separate, because ultimately it will lead to an integration of the technology and the human. And the better we can do it, the more also I think we allow people to be open to it, adapt to it, also provide training, raise awareness, understanding, equip people. I think the more we can support people through the shift, which we don't know really how it's going to look like.
And that has to happen, that shift, doesn't it? I was listening to a podcast with the founder of Anthropic who was saying, and I might get the date wrong, but he was saying that he was predicting that AGI will come in, I think, 2028. I think is what he said.
I heard 2029, but yes,
there we go.
I think
So I'm in the ballpark,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
And that might then be the last invention human beings ever need to make, right? Which blew my mind as a concept. I was like, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't made that connection. Yeah, at that point, because then it will be able to, you're handing the baton over in the relay race. It will then take that away. But this idea that AI is either going to take someone's job or somebody who knows how to use AI will take their job, right? So it's it's one of the two. And that's a big shift for people to get their head around. The only thing I can equate it to, and I don't think it's as significant, was growing up and my grandparents not knowing how to use a computer. There was a big divide. As a young person, I was like, oh, how do you not know how to use a computer? That will happen now with AI, And so as an HR leader, thinking about how do you equip the future workforce to be ready to take on the challenges of the world. What level of responsibility do you as an HR team have to make sure people educate themselves versus expecting people to come pre-prepared and take their own learning journey?
At the moment, we are offering the training. We have actually offered a big wealth of training, information to all our staff. So it's out there. It's many hours of learning. And I think we want to also leave it to the people. Some will dive much deeper. Others will acquire what's most relevant for them. That's something I think we need to navigate a bit more also as companies, is to be very clear what everyone should know. And that is more like a mandatory input, but also what's relevant for your job is not the same like for someone else. And so that you also don't overload people with information which they might not need. And that's something we are actually also working on, and it evolves continuously. So providing that access to information, to training, I think is important. Now it depends a bit on what jobs, and in certain jobs we do need people who have that capability, that skill, that understanding. In other jobs we don't. But I think we need to work on the question, how will some jobs change with AI support, AI impact, implications, so that we can also define how that very role, like a recruiter, for example, how does that role look in the future? When AI actually has supported us, and we have a pilot right now running in the UK, where the whole pre-screening of candidates is done with an agent. And we have great results there. So, and it's something which frees up time for the recruiter to really focus more on the part of the role which has the human connection, for example. But defining what is it actually, what will be at the core of a recruiter, what will the recruiter focus on in the future, and does that apply one size fits all across all industries, across all jobs, across all different employment terms, if you want, or not. These things I think we need to work on because we don't have the answers.
How do you think, I'm going to put you on the spot here, but how do you think AI will change the role of the CHRO?
I think like with any other role, the whole intellectual part will be heavily impacted by, which by the way, I actually think is quite good. You know, you can get a lot of information, summary, synthesis, etc. You can get supported by AI. I think what's harder is the human connection, which is really important in the HR role. So working with teams, with leaders, with employees directly, thinking through human topics, human questions, is something which maybe AI will be able to do as well one day. But for now, I think the human connection cannot be yet replaced by AI. And I think that's something where I see HR to continue to play an important role. In fact, actually to bring that to life even more and help teams, leaders to actually define what is at the core of a leader, what's at the core of our workforce, our people, the humanity, what sits actually in the meaning, in the being who we are, rather than in the intellect which we acquired.
Yeah.
There I see a big role, culture aspects.
I think that's really, I'm also a hopeful and optimistic person. And if AI can help bring out more humanity in the workplace, that would be fantastic. And when going back to earlier, when you described 70,000 people in these three big kind of divisions, like there's so much data there and there's so many insights there that take quite a lot of time to gather and kind of consolidate and help use to make strategic decisions, that AI could kind of almost help bring a lot of that together for you so that you can then get back to that humanity and kind of connecting with people as well.
Because when you think today, at least, AI, it's difficult for most AI to read emotions, to understand emotions. I know it's evolving and so on, but often in HR you also have the interpersonal topics or also systemic topics, you know, which you need to understand. Not just, it's not a synthesis of information, it's actually a judgment, it's a consequence of what you see. And then understanding how you can make an intervention, what intervention you need to do. That I don't think an AI yet can do. Question, will it be in the future? But that's something which still will take time. I think ideally you combine the human worker with the technology access. So instead of actually going now to a ChatGPT, ask questions, that you almost have it on the spot in your brain, right, or somehow accessible, so that you can take all the knowledge which is out there when you're making these important decisions, and they help you to lay out what's the best decision for your specific situation and company.
As someone with a lot of anxiety about my memory, that's a dream scenario. That would be I would love that world.
Yeah, me too.
So I know that you've recently published your inclusion and wellbeing framework at Adecco. It's a piece of work you've been focused on. Kind of, why now? Why was that a priority for you in your role?
So first of all, for us, culture and values is very important. So it is also from a leadership team, from our CEO's perspective, it's really core to us. Our values, we just actually launched last year, refreshed values. And I must say, I've seen after 12 months an incredible integration of our new values in our day-to-day life, in the stories people tell, in the language they use. I was very, very positive to see that, very pleased by it. And it just tells you how important it is. Because we are a people business, so the values are the anchor in who we are. Inclusion is one of our values. So it's core to who we are, it's core to our values, and it's core to how we do business. We want to do inclusive recruitment, for example. This is really, really important. The social impact we have, we want to include, we don't just access the easiest accessible workforce. We want to access the workforce which is far away from the labor market. That's also something we really are committed to. So this inclusive or inclusion aspect is very important. And we really wanted to expand the kind of classic approach to diversity, inclusion, to also include the aspect of the well-being of our people, because it also, that has to do a lot with inclusion. When people aren't so well, in particular also in the mental health space, how do we make people included, even though they might feel not just unwell, but also not belonging, or not that they feel they can be open about how they really feel. And so creating an environment where everyone can ideally open up, you know, who they are, how they feel, that's actually, that drove us to increasing or expanding to inclusion and well-being. And also we have, we've started some initiatives in fostering particular mental health in the organization.
So many programs historically and strategies historically have been quite reactively framed and reactively focused, waiting for problems to occur. But what really stood out for me was how proactive and preventative the strategy is. And was that, I assume that was intentional, but what's the rationale behind that?
So it's true, actually, we chose the framework to be very holistic. So we also have we're addressing it from an organizational perspective, so that we really also look, leadership plays a big role there, and that we create these programs like Encompass, which I mentioned, but also the awareness, raising the awareness, also integrating it into our values and so on, policies, processes, but then also we have the individual part, so that everyone ultimately creates the culture, everyone creates the communities. In there, we also have the volunteering work. So that's something which is at the core of who we are, the social impact. And so volunteering in the space of our own business is something we want to increase, that these opportunities for people to participate in volunteering work in the Champions Network, which is something people can raise their hands, you know, that they can be proactive, to your point. So I think the reactive part is also important. We also have an EAP program, of course. It's needed, but it's more, as the word says, reactive. It will help as a reaction. We want to proactively address or support or help to create an environment where people can be well, and when it's not the case, to also proactively support and help. And in particular, the raising the awareness, the understanding, I think that's really important.
And just staying on the inclusion topic, is that going back to what you were describing earlier about the environment being so important to somebody's health and well-being? So when you're talking about inclusion, you're also talking about psychological safety. You're kind of tying, it's that concept that as an organization, be it virtually, hybrid and in person, when somebody enters that, it's inclusive to them. And so therefore really it's psychologically safe to them. And that's so important, isn't it? Because if you don't have that, it's really hard for somebody to be well. If the environment somebody is in is toxic for whatever reason, finding well-being in that is an awful lot harder.
Yeah, I agree.
Actually.
I agree. We actually, with our top 150 leaders, we had co-created the top leadership principles, you know, for that group. And one of them is about being vulnerable, creating an environment of psychological safety. It's so important, so that we also said, the top 150 leaders said, this needs to be a core principle for ours. And I think as a company, because we are very people-oriented, we are very warm, we are an emotional company, we try to be inclusive as much as we can. And the feedback from our people, we had recently an engagement survey, tells us that, this is something where we are really strong, and it defines us. But we need to continue to put emphasis on it. And in the well-being space, we do a lot of things. I don't think it's known enough. I don't think people are aware always of what's there in terms of support. And then there are a few things we can do in addition.
Yeah, the thing about leaders is so important, isn't it? Like if our leaders don't lead on this topic, there's very little hope for it to be successful. But how do you, and I think you're right when you talked earlier about how in COVID well-being really came to the fore of people's minds, and mental health was a topic people were talking about really well, and for all the right reasons. There's a risk that it then slightly lost focus because other topics came to the fore. Going into the world in the next 12 and 18, 24 months, where there's going to be so much transformation, there's going to be so much challenge for people's health and well-being in that transformation that they don't have control over, that is pushing them to new limits, that might be creating job insecurity. How do you get your leaders to genuinely and authentically hold that well-being priority in their minds?
Well, one is with the principal. We actually are planning for sometime after the summer to have like a 360 assessment, a kind of feedback developmental assessment, which is about also providing feedback. How important is it to you? What's the feedback from people around you when it comes to looking after the health and well-being of our people? We have it as part, it's questions in our engagement survey, so we see, where do we stand? My manager takes or cares about my well-being is one of our questions. We score very high on it, so generally, but of course, leaders can see their own scores. And we will continue to focus on that because it's also part of our values, as I said, and I think the only thing we can do is to continuously monitor it, make sure that we hold it high where it is, and also continue to support leaders to equip them to manage through the change, because the change will take a lot of attention and focus from the leaders, and that the well-being of the people, caring for them, explaining, because it has different facets why people start to feel unwell, and it is about through uncertainty, through anxiety, through unclarity, and all of this comes down to leadership as well. So it's really helping leaders, not just how do you notice when someone isn't well mentally or generally, but it's more how do you help them not to become stressed or anxious.
Which is why when we talk about mental health to leaders, it's so important that we are talking about mental health and not mental illness, because we need them to understand that this is something that people have all of the time and they need to be talking about all of the time to prevent illnesses occurring. I know you have the Leaders Champion network, is that right?
Mental Health Champions Network.
Champions.
Yeah, so the Mental Health Champion Network we are building up now so that we have in our organization people who will be equipped and can be contact person for someone who wants to talk to someone when they're not well. So it's really about mental health. That's very specific for mental health. On the change side, to your point, and we are launching a program which is called Encompass, which is about equipping leaders to navigate their career and their leadership with cultural competence. So that is much more about the cultural competence, agility, so that they learn to take cultural competence as a core criteria for them to be successful as a leader.
And you have a hybrid work culture, don't you? How do you, because it's one thing asking our leaders to lead really well on culture or well-being if they're in the building with other people.
Yeah.
Because you can see and pick up body language, etc. It's harder to do that virtually or on a remote basis. So how do you manage that the difference of the hybrid and in-person environment?
I mean, we have mostly jobs which don't always need to be or can be actually hybrid, our job. So it's when I think of some of the previous companies I worked in, there were jobs you could not do from home. It's just not possible. So in my previous company, half of the population had to be in the production side at hospital. We don't have that. So for us, most of the jobs can actually be done remotely or from home. But we do see as well that in some areas we started to realize that when people work mostly from home, you start to miss this kind of connection, this kind of human fabric, which makes the kind of the core of the organization, of the team, of the collaboration.
It's that humanity again,
isn't
it?
Yeah, exactly. And so I've seen leaders who have asked much more for people to come back into, be it branches where we recruit, into offices, etc. So we see that too. And we don't have like a mandated amount of days globally. We might have differences by country, but not a global kind of approach. We're discussing it regularly, but we are, let's say, more flexible around it, but we are very conscious about fostering the human connection with an intention. I think that's important. So again, to your question, it's not that we have a global policy, everyone needs to be in the office at least 3 days, but we do have leaders who actually have asked people back entirely because they realize it's just not working at the moment.
And I think everyone's on a journey with it,
exactly.
Aren't they? Yeah,
and others who say, I have anyway a global team. They can't even be together in one office. So Yeah, so it depends on the jobs, it depends on the situation, on the country, on the context, etc. In branches where we recruit, people are typically more in the office.
Yeah.
Because you need to have that connection,
And
exchange.
in that environment, it makes sense.
Yeah. And or you have people who coming into the branch,
Yeah.
to apply for jobs.
Right.
So it needs to be there, right? It
Yeah.
can't be just a closed branch. So
yeah. And that's so interesting, isn't it? Because, and I'm sure similarly for you, like when you go out and speak with the CHRO leaders in the world, there's so many, nobody has the same answer on hybrid, remote, and it's very specific to the organization and then people's personal preference and opinion. And it's like one great big kind of social change that's taking place, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree. You see big differences. I do see there are regions where it was harder to bring people back to the office. I think there are regions where it works very well, hybrid, because that's just how the society, just came back, if you want. And then other regions where most people are just back 100% or most of the time. So it's also a bit local or culturally impacted. But I do see that if teams never connect face-to-face, it has an impact on the team effectiveness and also on the well-being of the people often. When you never meet, or in particular when you actually never even go to an office and you're on your own all the time, it's not easy.
Absolutely. It can be much trickier to make it work. Yeah, I'd love to, talking of leadership, but for you personally, what are the leadership skills or qualities that you have held really close to your heart, and which are the ones that you think you thrive at, and how are you a good leader?
I think for me what's important when I lead a team is that I treat everyone equally. I think it's the question of inclusion. I grew up as an immigrant, a child of immigrants. My parents are from at the time, Czechoslovakia, came to Switzerland. And so I grew up being not Swiss. Now I'm Swiss by now, but I grew up as a foreigner in Switzerland. And so having experienced what it means to not be the same, to be different, even though I don't necessarily look different, and still I experienced what it means to be discriminated and experienced to not belong, not be part of a group or society. And I think that most likely shaped that consciousness that I don't want people to be excluded. I want everyone to be part of the team. Everyone is equal. Of course, on every team I had people who had more senior roles, less senior roles, but it shouldn't matter. Everyone plays the same role. In fact, actually the ones with more senior roles play even a bigger role to integrate everyone. And so that is for me an important one. Treating people in the same way is a key leadership trait.
I love that, and I totally align with it. But how do you actually make someone feel included? Like, what are the tools that enable that to happen?
Sometimes you have teams where you have an inner circle and an outer circle, right? Inner circle is where the decisions are made. Outer circle is also there, but you often realize you lack information, you're not included. That is, for example, something I never did, or I really tried to avoid, because that leads to the fact that you have less transparency, people feel excluded, they don't know what's actually happening.
So do you avoid that by being more transparent?
To be more transparent and to not have subgroups, simply. You don't have a individual. Of course, sometimes you have one-to-ones and you decide, but then bringing everyone back together or ask the team, make sure so-and-so is also, clear, aware, on board. Yeah.
So how do you manage that personally? So your team, spanning those different divisions of the organization, like how do you must have regular meetings with certain people, and then you need to communicate that information to the wider group. And how do you manage that? And do you all come together?
Yes. So we have weekly meetings where we have like a shorter interaction on ongoing topics, on topics we need to decide. Then I have one-to-ones. And if there are topics which impact other colleagues, which often are, then I usually actually want that my team collaborates. So then I ask them to make sure or engage with the respective other team members, etc. And then we have really face-to-face meetings where we discuss more strategic topics. We also work on us as a team effectiveness.
Interesting.
We have team coaching sessions.
So how do you do that? You have a coach come in and
Well, we should actually, right? We have a big coaching business, we actually leverage our own organization. The LHH team comes in, helps us to grow as a team.
And as an executive team, do you have similar things with your peers in the executive team?
Yeah, so as an executive team, we also work on us as a team. We have had a few changes now on the leadership team, so we are actually taking it up now in September again. So yes, it's important that, I mean, the impact of a well-functioning team, and of course even more so on an executive team, is big for a company. And so spending the time, the resources, the attention on that is critical.
And part of the inclusion thing for me is about knowing other people as well, and not only in the world of work but out of the world of work, and part of that relies on people being quite open about their home life and their family life, whatever it might be. And then the other really important thing, which is exactly in your framework's language, is inclusion and well-being. It's recognizing that as leaders we need to look after our own well-being. It's that aeroplane kind of put your own mask on first scenario, right? We need to do that. For you as a leader, how do you look after your well-being?
Well, one thing I said already. So this times actually of going out in the nature when I work from home. So I also I can work in a hybrid way. I'm here in the office, I travel, or I work from home. And when I am at home, also including of course the weekends, I always go in the morning early. We go with my husband, so we also have a time for us. We can discuss and chat and so on. And then in the evening, so I usually go at least 1.5 hours then out overall. And that's one thing. So this being in the nature, being of course spending time with my husband, quality time, or with our son when he feels like he's coming with us. But it's great. So you have these moments where you're just outside, you can chat, etc. That is for me important. And then the other one is to listen to your inner voice. And that sounds a bit easy, but it's something I had to learn for sure. That I also know when is a moment when, there's a lot going on and I need to prioritize where I'm going to put my effort and my attention.
How do you find space to listen to your inner voice? Because it's quite a hard thing, that, isn't it? It's like our minds are so busy. So how do you make the space for that?
I think it's the symptoms. I just know how they are. So for example, I hear less well, then I know this is because I think my body just starts to, how do you say that? You just filter out noises if you want. And I can hear you, but it's just symptoms. I think it's important to listen to your body. Yeah. But you need to learn it, how you do it. And so it's moments and I realized that's there, and then I notice I need to change something, or I need to move work, meetings, so that I have time to reflect, to do certain work, which then I don't have time. So that's how I reprioritize then.
And are you good at are you good at closing the digital world away to give yourself space? Can you shut down your laptop and close your phone? And how are you on that?
I think if you ask my husband and my son, they will probably say no. So the good thing is when I go out with the dog, I don't usually then I'm all the time on the phone.
Yeah.
This is then 1.5 hours I wouldn't be on the phone. Of course, when I have meetings, you're in and it's not face to face, then you're on the laptop. But I try to then minimize or then prioritize what I do.
It's hard though, isn't it? Sometimes in the environment we find ourselves in, and
yes.
to make it a reality, right? So I was really struck this morning. I've not been to Zurich before, which is I'm just so delighted to have had the chance to come to meet you and here. And as I walked around the lake, it was facilitative of wanting to be reflective. Because it's an environment that is calm. And I was thinking that it's harder in Soho in central London to wake up in the morning, or in Manhattan to wake up and find that peace.
Yeah.
So the environment we're in is really influential on whether or not we can find peace.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. But I do think it's probably a bit harder than, if you have to find it, you need to find a way of doing it. That's true.
But either way, it's the intentionality. And then that comes down to, well, why should leaders put intentionality onto prioritizing their own well-being? And that's where I think the link between performance and well-being needs to be clearly articulated to leaders, which is like, it's not just a nice to have, hey, you should be well. It's like, if you're not, then how are you going to find that inner peace? How are you going to find the calm to make the right decisions? How are you going to be able to know the people around you to be inclusive? So it's almost that you can't create a high-performing environment without well-being.
I agree. And we have, of course, like in any company, we also have people who suffered from a burnout, who suffered from stress-related symptoms. And the difference I see in the Adecco Group compared to other companies is that people are more open about it. So they are more open to speak about it. Not everyone, of course, but there are even senior leaders who will speak about this, who are opening up at least to their teams or to the environment in which they operate. And I think that's a big strength, that you actually realize this can happen to everyone. And I think this is a big strength of a culture, that you can talk about it, you know. In terms of well-being, generally we have, that is a topic which we openly talk about and support. We have all different programs, also very local programs. So it's more about mental health and well-being.
But it's very interesting that it's not as easy to do as it seems on paper in a way. I just think about it in my own life, right? So as a clinical psychologist, you probably have the same thing. People say, oh, you're a psychologist, so you must look after yourself, whatever. Yeah. And I actually think a lot of psychologists are people who have gone to that profession for a reason, that they want to discover something about themselves.
That's true.
But I remember once being invited to be on a panel with, I think it was Financial Times or someone, to do a panel about burnout. And I'm a founder of a tech startup, and I think I was the closest I've ever been to burnout in my life. And I didn't acknowledge that on the podcast. And it's been such an important learning for me, because I had a chance to be honest then about, well, actually, I'm feeling pretty close to burnout myself. But I didn't choose to talk about it because I felt that I had a role to play or a responsibility to play. And it's a really important learning for me as an experience, that, because I don't think I didn't behave in that moment in a way that I advocate others should. And I didn't behave in a way that was totally authentic to myself.
And why do you think you didn't do it?
Because I don't think I felt confident to do it. I think I probably felt that I would be showing a weakness or a failure somehow. And I raise it really because I think it's important to also recognize how hard it is for people to talk about that.
And that's what I'm saying. I think the environment which we have, I've seen it more than in other companies, that people have opened up about it and said, I wasn't well, it was too much, and I need to learn to deal with all the tasks which come with my role in a different way. Yeah. And of course, not everyone does it, right? But I've seen it more than in other companies. I think it's a strength. I think it tells us something about the inclusion, the mindset of inclusion. And to your point, being also a bit open about or bringing facts and data in how do you actually bring the connection between well-being and performance. Yeah. If you actually look at the stats, and they are everything between 15% up to 40% prevalence in terms of people experiencing either typically depression or anxiety disorders or challenges, that's a big number. If I think of 70,000 people and we go for the, let's say, 25%, I mean, that's many thousand people who are impacted by it, or between 15 and 20,000 people. Yeah. And if you say that to leaders, then they suddenly realize this is a big number. Yeah. And if that amount of people doesn't feel well enough to perform up to the level they would like to, and we would like them to, then you start to realize how big the issue actually is, and where we as an employer also play a role. You can also make the more, let's say, conservative, even if it's the 15%, that's more than 10,000 people. Yeah, and it's the duality of it. It's the people who are presenting with a mental illness, or depression, anxiety, or are presenting with burnout, if that group is creates the leading cause of absenteeism, presenteeism, and staff turnover. So it's a huge economic cost. And on the other end of the spectrum, the people who are really flourishing and are looking after their well-being and are living their best lives and contributing the most in the way they can, they're contributing like a 10x to the performance of the organization. Yeah. So that it's a problem to solve that's enormous, and an opportunity to grab, which is enormous. Yeah. And as we go back to the topic of transformation and AI and all of the pressures that's putting on people, like now more than ever, that focus on humanity or that focus on inclusion and well-being is
absolutely central to the future of the
Agree.
working world.
Yeah, agree. Bringing out the humanity.
Bringing out the humanity.
And that's actually what will differ us from the AI for a long time, at least. And nurturing that, being conscious of it, is important for us as organizations, for us in HR, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to ask you, I could sit and chat for hours, but I know we're coming towards the end. I'd love to ask you a couple of kind of closing questions. The first one is, when you look forward to the world ahead, what role do you hope, given all the things we've talked about, what is the responsibility for HR? Like, what can HR become in that new world?
It is about the awareness, the intentionality about the humanity, what is actually at the core of who we are, not what we acquired in terms of knowledge, but who we are as beings. I think that's one thing. And also actually giving that much more power. Because for a long time in, society and humankind, it was more about who knows all the answers, who knows the best, who has acquired most knowledge. And I think that will be taken over by AI, right? So by technology, having not all the answers, but having huge amount of knowledge will be not taken over, but certainly will have a place. And we, of course, can continue to have a lot of knowledge. But the power in us as human beings is actually the humanity we bring. The emotions, the humanity, the soul, if you want. That's maybe more a religious term. But it is about who are we at the core as a person.
It's like our essence.
The essence, and that's also different. It's not everyone has the same essence, but that is something which is the power in us as humans. And that, I think, is something which HR can support, should support, to bring to the forefront, and with that also in an organization, make the organization unique, the culture unique, leverage that essence into creativity, into innovation. That's, I think, where we can contribute. And until we are there, of course, it's about accompanying the people through the change, which is in some instances going to be quite significant, maybe in others less significant or will take longer. But this kind of accompanying people on that journey and for a successful company, helping them to adapt and to really bring that core of the people into the center of the organization.
No, I absolutely love that, and I totally agree. If you were meeting somebody, let's say a 21-year-old, joining the world of HR, you're saying, okay, right, well, here's what you need to know. What would you say?
So I think it's fundamental in HR that you love to be with people, that you need to be interested in people, that you need to want to understand how people tick, what makes people tick, what are the motives of people, and how that comes together in an organization, and being able to support that, to grow people, but also organization teams, and be excited about it, passionate about it. That for me is fundamental. Everything else you can learn or will be done by agents or you know, but that interest in a person, interest in the growth of people, to build, to grow environments, people, that is fundamental.
Yeah, there's something so hopeful that we've spent the time talking about change and technology and AI, and yet what we keep coming back to is this amplified importance of humanity. What a wonderful kind of place to end. Thank you so much for your time. It's been just delightful talking to you.
Same here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do remember to subscribe to Lead From Within wherever you get your podcasts, so that you don't miss any of the future episodes where we're talking to the world's leading CHROs about the future of work and why well-being and mental health is so central to it.